I stood at the front door, clutching the pension statement, staring at the son I raised. He had taken my name off the account. My pension, my hard work, now his to control. "Mom, you're embarrassing," he'd said earlier. But I wasn't embarrassed. I was done. Done being invisible to the man I birthed. And now, he was about to watch me take back everything. Starting with his house. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The envelope was plain white, the kind Evelyn usually tossed onto the counter with the rest of the week's junk mail. But the return address in the top left corner gave her pause. Front Range Community Credit Union. She sat down at the kitchen table, her cane leaned gently against the nearest chair, and peeled it open with a practiced flick of her nail. She didn't know why her fingers trembled. Maybe it was the silence of the condo pressing in too tightly, or maybe, deep down, she already knew. The tri-folded statement slid out stiffly, like it didn't want to be read. Evelyn unfolded it, smoothing the creases flat against the worn wood of the table. Her eyes scanned the page with the same efficient precision she once used to sort out student files. Michael Carter. His name, right there in bold next to primary account holder. She blinked, scrolled her finger down, then up again. Her name wasn't on it. Nowhere. Not even in the fine print at the bottom. The air shifted, like the walls had pulled a half-inch closer. She lowered the paper, her heart beating with a sick thump against her ribs, and looked around the room as if someone might confirm what she was seeing. But it was just her. Just the tick of the ceramic cat clock above the stove, and the low hum of the fridge. She brought the paper back up to her face. Maybe she missed something. Maybe her name was buried in a subheading. She grabbed her reading glasses from the table's edge, slid them on, and reread the entire thing top to bottom. Nothing. Not even a joint holder mention. The page began to flutter slightly in her hand. She wasn't shaking. The paper was. That's what she told herself. Then her phone, face up beside her, buzzed with a call. Dana. Speakerphone. Evelyn stared at the screen before answering with a soft tap. "Hey, Evelyn!" Dana's voice rang out too bright, too casual. "I was just talking with Michael about family budgeting and I figured, well, since we're all aligned now, it'd be good to chat through groceries and utilities, see where we can trim a little fat." Evelyn stared down at the document. "We're all aligned now?" Her thumb hovered over the end button. Dana continued, not waiting for a response. "And Michael said you've got your pension coming through this week, so we thought maybe it'd be smart to put that toward the property tax bucket. Consolidate things a bit." There was a pause, like Dana expected Evelyn to say something. Evelyn placed the statement face down on the table, very gently, as though handling a loaded weapon. "Now's not a good time," she said evenly. "I'll call you later." Before Dana could chirp a response, Evelyn tapped the screen and ended the call. The silence that returned was sharp-edged. She picked up the statement again. This time she didn't reread it. She just stared at the name, Michael Carter, where hers should have been. The thought crept in like a whisper from a locked room. "He's taken my name off the account." She stood up slowly, using the edge of the table for balance. Her knees ached, but that familiar pain felt grounding right now. Something real in a room where everything else suddenly felt warped. At the counter, she opened the drawer where she kept her old pension paperwork. Her fingers hovered over the manila folder labeled Retirement 2018, but didn't pull it out. Not yet. Not while her hands were still trembling. Instead, she turned back toward the table. The statement still lay there, its top edge curling slightly, like it too was uncomfortable in this house. Evelyn exhaled through her nose, quietly furious. And then, almost absently, she whispered aloud into the empty condo, "How long has he been planning this?" The manila folder felt heavier than she remembered. Evelyn carried it to the kitchen table like a relic, something sacred and buried too long. She eased into the chair with a slow exhale and opened it, careful not to tear the corners. Neatly filed inside were years of documents, pension enrollment forms, beneficiary notices, tax forms, all of it bearing her name, her social security number, her signature in that familiar, slanted script she'd perfected in college. She scanned each page with mounting clarity. She was the primary. Always had been. But facts, she knew, could be manipulated. Paper could be altered. Signatures could be forged. Her eyes settled on one document in particular, the original pension disbursement form, signed in blue ink back in 2018, the year Harold passed. Her name, Evelyn June Carter, written with the slow precision of a woman still learning to stand on her own after 50 years of marriage. The signature hadn't changed. She recognized the slight wobble at the J. That was the month her hands were still unsteady with grief. She looked again at the bank statement on the table beside it. Michael Carter. No co-holder, no Evelyn. The two papers sat side by side like opposing witnesses, and between them, a betrayal she could no longer rationalize. She picked up her phone and tapped in the number listed on the pension office's website. As the line rang, she glanced out the window toward City Park. From here, she could see the edge of the duck pond through the fading summer trees. It had always calmed her, but today, the view just looked far away. "Pension office, this is Paula," came a woman's voice, clear, polite, matter-of-fact. Evelyn sat up straighter. "Yes, hello. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm calling because I received a statement that doesn't look right. It's from my bank, and it lists my son, Michael Carter, as the sole recipient of my pension deposits. I'm trying to understand how that's possible." There was a moment of typing. Evelyn heard the soft clicking of a keyboard. "All right, give me just a moment, Ms. Carter," Paula said, still calm, but now with the clipped tone of someone switching into technical mode. "Can I verify your birth date and the last 4 digits of your social?" Evelyn provided them. The sound of more typing followed. Her fingers tightened around the phone. "Okay," Paula said finally. "I do see your pension record here. It shows you as the primary recipient, active since March of 2018, with monthly disbursements routed to an account ending in—" She paused to read it. 4,472. Evelyn's stomach turned. The account number on her recent statement was different. "That's not the number on the bank statement I got this morning," she said, her voice a notch sharper than she intended. "That's not where the money is going anymore." Silence, then. "Do you have that statement in front of you?" "I do." "Would you mind reading the last 4 digits of the account listed there?" Evelyn did. More silence. Then Paula spoke, slower this time. "That account isn't registered under your name in our system." Evelyn blinked. "Excuse me?" "I mean, our records indicate your pension should only be going to an account under your name. If there's been a change in the receiving account and your name is no longer listed, that's concerning. Very concerning." The quiet between them stretched. Evelyn's voice, when it returned, was cold steel. "So, you're saying it shouldn't be like this?" "I'm saying something's wrong," Paula replied carefully. "I'd recommend coming in. Bring any documents you have. We can escalate this through the appropriate channels." Evelyn thanked her and ended the call. She didn't move for a long moment, just stared at the opposing papers laid before her, like a puzzle she'd never wanted to solve. Then, slowly, she closed the manila folder and stacked it with the bank statement. Her hands had stopped shaking, her breath had steadied, but the tightness in her jaw was new, a slow clenching that felt more like preparation than panic. Evelyn dialed Carl Benson's number with a steadiness that surprised her. The last time they spoke, months ago, it was about a neighbor who'd wired money to a fake sweepstakes scam. Back then, she'd asked questions out of polite curiosity, even cracked a joke about how you'd have to be a fool to fall for something like that. The irony sat heavy on her tongue now. Carl picked up after 2 rings. "Benson, financial crimes." "It's Evelyn Carter," she said. Her voice came out even, measured, the same tone she used to use with stubborn parents in the school office. "We need to talk. It's about my pension. I have proof something's been tampered with." There was a pause, and she imagined him sitting up straighter behind a battered government-issue desk, already flipping open a legal pad. "Tell me what you've got." By the time the call ended, Evelyn had a list, a clear one. Print everything, pension letters, the original account documents, statements from both accounts, and any email threads with Michael regarding her finances. She hung up, feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Direction. She opened her laptop. The startup sound echoed through the kitchen like a declaration. Folder by folder, Evelyn searched. She wasn't the fastest with technology, but she was organized, always had been. Her desktop was arranged by year, and her financial records sat in neat digital folders, updated every January. She found PDF versions of old bank statements, the first pension deposit receipts, even a scan of the original bank form with her name clearly listed as the owner. And then the emails. She hesitated before opening the thread with Michael. The subject lines were deceptively harmless. Tax prep help, 2023. Need to update the routing. Mom, quick favor, sign and scan back? She clicked through them, skimming. The tone was always the same, casual, overly confident, dripping with that I'll-handle-it bravado Michael wore like a tailored suit. There it was, one email with an attachment labeled Power of Addy Draft PDF, sent last September. The body text read, "No rush on this, just cleaning up a few things in case of emergencies. You don't even need to look too closely. Just sign the bottom and I'll take care of the rest." Her stomach clenched. She had signed something. Last fall. She barely remembered it, just a blur of trust, of letting him take care of it. But she hadn't understood what it was, and she damn sure hadn't agreed to let him reroute her only source of income. The printer whirred to life behind her, its old gears groaning with every page. She fed it document after document, each sheet a breadcrumb on the trail Michael never thought she'd follow. Just as the last page slid out, her phone buzzed with a text. Dana. "Hey, Evelyn! Michael and I were thinking maybe a spring vacation this year? Something chill like Santa Fe? Could be nice for all of us to recharge." Evelyn stared at the screen. Santa Fe. She typed back one word. No. Another buzz. Dana. LOL, okay. Just tossing it out there. Talk soon. She didn't respond. Instead, she slid the papers into a clean manila envelope, labeling it in her tidy all-caps script. Pension. Evidence. The house was still, the late afternoon sun casting a golden rectangle across her floorboards. Dust floated in it like glitter, undisturbed. But inside her, the stillness was gone, replaced by something sharp, engineered, alive. Her phone rang again. Carl. "Morning appointments confirmed," he said. 9 a.m. downtown. I'll meet you in the lobby." "I'll be there," Evelyn replied. Evelyn stepped through the double glass doors of the Denver Police Financial Crimes Unit just after 8:55 a.m., envelope clutched tight against her chest like a shield. The lobby smelled faintly of printer toner and burnt coffee. Her orthopedic shoes tapped quietly against the scuffed linoleum, and every sound, from the squeak of her cane to the cough of a man seated near the bulletin board, felt amplified. A woman in uniform at the front desk glanced up. "Ma'am?" "I have an appointment with Detective Benson," Evelyn said. Before the woman could respond, Carl appeared in the hallway behind her, his frame filling the door like a dam holding back the tide. His short-sleeved shirt looked like it hadn't seen an iron in weeks, but the look on his face was sharp, all focus. "Mrs. Carter, come on back." She followed him down a narrow corridor lined with faded blue carpet and motivational posters from the late 2000s. At the end, he pushed open a door to a cramped office. 2 chairs, one overburdened metal file cabinet, and a desk drowning in manila folders. "Sorry it's not glamorous," he said. "Budget cuts." "I'm not here for the decor," Evelyn replied, sinking into the seat across from him. He gestured to her envelope. "That everything?" She nodded and handed it over. "Chronological, originals and printed emails. You'll want to start with the pension documents." Carl slipped on his reading glasses and flipped the envelope open. He didn't rush. He took each page out carefully, flattening the edges like a forensic analyst instead of a beat cop. The only sound in the room was the occasional hum of the fluorescent light overhead. "Your name was the original account holder?" he asked without looking up. "Yes, since 2018. He compared signatures. "This one here." He tapped a form dated 3 weeks ago, with Evelyn's name typed beneath a signature that only vaguely resembled hers. "Did you sign this?" She leaned forward and studied it. Her stomach turned. It was wrong. Too smooth, too neat. It didn't carry the familiar hesitation in her hand. That hesitation had been there ever since arthritis started creeping into her joints 2 years ago. "That's not mine," she said. "It looks close, but it isn't mine." Carl's lips pressed into a thin line. He pulled out a highlighter and marked the form with a deliberate stroke. Then he slid it beside her original 2018 pension signature. "Someone tried to imitate it," he said, voice low almost to himself. "They didn't do a great job. The angle's off. Pressure too light. It's forged, Mrs. Carter." Evelyn looked down at the forms, both now side by side on the desk. 2 names, one real, one pretending. "Michael," she said. Not a question, a statement of grief wrapped in granite. Carl leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. "I've seen a lot of these. Sons, daughters, caregivers. It always starts the same way, with trust. And then they see how easy it is to reroute one thing, one payment, one signature. Before you know it, it's a pattern." She swallowed hard. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap now, as if gripping something invisible. "What happens now?" Carl straightened. "Now, I open a formal case. I'll request banking records, contact the credit union, pull IP logs on the digital signatures if we can. We'll need to prove it wasn't you who authorized the transfer, but based on what you've brought, Mrs. Carter," he met her eyes, "we've got a strong start." Evelyn nodded once, not triumphantly, but like a soldier hearing the battle plan read aloud. He continued, "You'll need to keep everything close. Don't tip your hand. I know it'll be hard, but don't confront him yet." "I won't," she said, and she meant it. Carl scribbled a case number on a sticky note and handed it to her. "You'll need this for everything going forward. Copy shop, lawyer, credit bureau, anyone who tries to ask questions. Keep it with you." She tucked it into her wallet, right beside the family photo that now felt like evidence in a crime she hadn't realized was happening. The law office was perched on the 5th floor of an older downtown building, the kind with brass elevator buttons that clicked when pressed, and lobby tiles that hadn't seen polish in a decade. Evelyn stepped out of the elevator at exactly 10 a.m., her leather purse tucked tightly under one arm and the case folder clutched in her other hand. The brass placard on the frosted glass door read, "Lewis and Payne, Elder Law and Estate Services." It was quiet inside, the kind of quiet money likes. Dignified. Insulated. A younger paralegal gave Evelyn a kind smile and motioned toward the back. Sandra Lewis looked exactly how Evelyn remembered her from Harold's will signing years ago. Silver gray hair swept into a twist, pressed navy suit, glasses perched halfway down her nose. She stood as Evelyn entered. "Evelyn," she said warmly, reaching across the desk with both hands. "I'm so sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances." "Me too," Evelyn replied. She didn't sit right away. She pulled the folder from her purse and laid it on the polished desk like evidence at a trial. Sandra opened it, flipping through the documents with the sharp efficiency of someone who'd seen worse, but still cared deeply when wrong was done. "This is exactly what I need," she said after a few minutes. "Let me be blunt. If what you're describing is accurate, and it appears to be, then your son had no legal right to reassign access to your pension, especially not by forging your signature. The power of attorney file he submitted is invalid if it was fraudulently obtained." Evelyn sat down then, her back straight. "So what do I do?" Sandra turned her computer screen slightly and clicked open a template document. "We revoke it, in writing. Then we reestablish your full financial authority, across the board. This includes new instructions to your bank, to the pension office, and to any affiliated trust or estate handlers." Evelyn nodded slowly. Sandra began typing. The keys clicked in bursts, each word forming a line of defense. She paused only to confirm spellings or cross-check dates. When she finished, she printed 2 clean copies and slid them across the desk. Evelyn reached for the pen. Her hand, for once, didn't tremble. She signed her name deliberately, like she was rewriting a contract with herself. Sandra notarized the signature, then reached for the second form. "This one informs all involved institutions that the previous POA is null and void. Once we file it, it takes immediate effect." Evelyn signed that one too. She didn't look at the copies as Sandra placed them in a slim envelope. "We'll walk this to the clerk's office ourselves," Sandra said. "I want eyes on the timestamp." Just then, Evelyn's phone began buzzing in her purse. She pulled it out. Michael. Sandra saw the name flash across the screen and raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to take that?" "No," Evelyn said. The phone continued to buzz on the glass table like a trapped insect. A few seconds later, it stopped. Then it rang again. "Michael." She powered the phone off. Sandra offered no comment. She simply pressed her lips into a firm line and continued gathering the documents. "Once these are filed," she said quietly, "you'll have legal grounds to report the unauthorized transactions to the pension fund and your bank. If Carl does his job, and I suspect he will, you could recover a portion of what was misrouted, but more importantly, you're reclaiming control." Evelyn felt it then. Not relief, not yet, but traction. The sensation of a vehicle finally catching on pavement after months of sliding on ice. Evelyn sat in the same chair at Carl's office the next morning, the vinyl seat slightly cracked beneath her coat. The manila folder was now creased at the edges, worn from handling, but its contents had gained weight, power, clarity. Carl closed the door behind him with a soft click and dropped a new printout on the desk between them. "Got this late last night," he said. "Came from the digital forensics team." Evelyn leaned forward. The paper showed 2 signatures, one from her verified pension form in 2018 and the second from the suspicious account authorization dated 3 weeks ago. Each had been analyzed, blown up, annotated in red with arrows pointing to slope angles, stroke hesitations, and pressure inconsistencies. "The bottom one's the fake," Carl said, tapping the page. Handwriting software flagged 6 critical mismatches. Plus, the timestamp metadata shows it was uploaded from an IP address registered to a business account under Michael's name. Evelyn stared at the comparison. The forged version mimicked her hand well, close enough that a casual eye might accept it. But not hers. It had none of the fatigue she knew lived in her fingers now, no wariness in the loops, no grief pressed into the downward strokes. She felt something hot crawl up her throat, a mix of humiliation and betrayal. She swallowed it. "He didn't even think I'd notice," she said quietly. Carl didn't respond right away. He gave her space. "Then, he didn't expect you'd fight." That landed differently. Evelyn nodded once and slipped the printout into her folder. The noise it made, soft paper on soft paper, sounded final. By the time she stepped outside, her breath steamed in the morning chill. The day was bright but sharp, the kind of dry Colorado cold that made everything seem more vivid. She paused at the crosswalk, her hand still on the folder. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. "Voicemail, Dana." She pressed play. "Hi, Evelyn, it's me," Dana began, her tone breezy but too careful. "I just wanted to say, I know you're working through a lot of stuff right now, but can we maybe not turn this into a thing? I mean, it's family. You know how Michael can get... He means well, even if he oversteps sometimes. Let's just handle this quietly, okay? We don't need outsiders involved." There was a long pause before the message ended with a chirpy, "Call me if you want to talk." Evelyn stared out across the street, watching a young couple with a toddler wait for the light to change. Then, without meaning to, she laughed. It wasn't joyful, it was hollow, brittle, like glass hitting the edge of a sink. Let's not turn this into a thing. As if her financial erasure was a dinner party squabble, as if silence was some kind of civility. She shoved the phone back into her pocket. She didn't go home. Instead, she walked 2 blocks to a diner she used to frequent with Harold, the Corner Biscuit, a squat little building with sun-faded menus and a cracked leather booth in the back where no one bothered you. She slid into it now and ordered coffee, eggs, and toast. No small talk, no fuss. When the plate arrived, she took her time. The coffee was strong and a little bitter, just how Harold liked it. The eggs were rubbery, but she didn't care. She chewed slowly, her hands still resting on the folder beside her. The phone buzzed again, this time an email. From Sandra Lewis, subject, "Your official." Message, "Filed. Pension is now under your sole control again. I'll forward confirmation docs this afternoon. Proud of you, Evelyn." She stared at the screen for a long moment, then smiled, not fully, but with something real behind it. She was taking her name back. The bell above Evelyn's condo door buzzed just as she'd poured hot water over her afternoon tea. She froze. No one ever came by unannounced. She moved quietly toward the peephole, her slippered steps barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. Michael! Standing just inches from the door, shoulders squared, jaw clenched. The collar of his jacket was turned up, like he'd rushed here from somewhere important, or pretended he had. In his hand, a crisp, white envelope, her pension confirmation letter, unmistakably creased the same way Sandra had folded it. Evelyn's breath stayed still in her chest. He rang again. She opened the door halfway, just enough to block his full view of the apartment behind her. "You're not supposed to have that," she said flatly. Michael didn't smile. He stepped forward slightly, toe nearly at the threshold. "You filed new paperwork, behind my back." Evelyn lifted her chin. "It was never your business." His mouth twitched. Not into a smile, but something tighter. "I've been managing your accounts for months. You didn't seem to mind when the taxes got filed, or when I helped you refinance the heating bill. That was help," she said. "This was theft." Michael's voice dropped low. "You don't understand how fragile everything is right now. Dana and this affects all of us." She laughed once, a bitter puff of air. "You're right, it does." Dana's voice echoed faintly from Michael's phone. He was on speaker. Evelyn caught the end of a sentence. "She's just overreacting again." "Tell her," Evelyn said sharply, "that if she ever wants to speak to me again, she can do it in person and without hiding behind your pocket." Michael lowered the phone without a word. Dana's voice cut off mid-sentence. "You're making a mistake," he said. "This won't end the way you think it will." "No," she said, and her voice was so calm it nearly chilled the air between them. "It won't end the way you thought it would." He looked past her shoulder as though expecting someone, a neighbor maybe, to interrupt this moment and tilt it in his favor. But no one came. "You're putting family second," he said finally, quieter now. "Over what? Pride? You're not getting younger, Mom. And the way you're acting is the way someone acts when they've been stolen from," she finished. For a beat, neither spoke. Then Evelyn stepped backward, reached for her phone on the hallway table, and without breaking eye contact, tapped to dial. "Who are you calling?" Michael asked. She didn't answer. Carl's voice came through the speaker after 2 rings. "Carl Benson." "Detective," Evelyn said clearly. "My son has just arrived uninvited to my home. He's upset about legal filings he had no right to interfere with. I'd like this incident logged, please." Michael's eyes widened slightly. Carl didn't miss a beat. "On it. If he won't leave, I can have a cruiser swing by." Michael raised both hands, the way someone does when they want to pretend they're harmless. "You don't have to do that," he muttered. Evelyn looked at him, not with hatred, but with something heavier. Disappointment she'd finally stopped trying to bury. She ended the call. "Then leave." Michael hesitated, for once unsure of his footing. But he did leave. No words, no door slam, just the quiet shuffle of retreat. Evelyn stood at the open door for a long moment after he disappeared down the stairwell. She didn't move, didn't cry, just closed the door, locked the bolt, and turned the chain. The first call came just after 8 a.m., just as Evelyn was watering the potted basil on her kitchen windowsill. "Evelyn? It's Marlene from First Baptist. Honey, are you all right?" Evelyn paused, the watering can halfway tipped. "Of course I am, Marlene. Why?" "Well," the woman hesitated. "Michael posted something last night. Said you've been confused. Said you've been making decisions that aren't in your best interest. I didn't want to believe it, but you know how people talk. He said you were, exhibiting signs of mental decline." Evelyn closed her eyes. Inhale, exhale. She counted to 3 before responding. "Thank you for checking, Marlene. I'll send you something in writing in a bit. Don't worry, I'm very clear on what I'm doing." She hung up gently, then turned to her phone and opened Facebook. Michael had posted a long, meandering status on his personal page, visible to friends and their extended networks. A carefully worded attack, dressed up as concern. "It's hard watching someone you love become less of who they were. We've been trying to help my mother behind the scenes, but the reality is she's struggling with clarity lately. She's refusing assistance and making financial decisions that could hurt her in the long run. Please pray for our family during this difficult time." A handful of mutual acquaintances had commented, mostly polite sympathy, a few raised eyebrows. Evelyn stared at the screen. Her hands didn't shake, her jaw didn't tighten. Instead, she reached for her reading glasses and walked into her office. She opened a Word document and began typing. "To whom it may concern, I am writing this of sound mind and under no duress. Due to recent falsehoods spread by my son Michael Carter, I am making the following clarification public. I have not been diagnosed with any cognitive condition. My attorney, Sandra Lewis, has filed the appropriate paperwork to revoke his access to my financial affairs, following a confirmed incident of forgery and unauthorized control over my pension. Supporting documents are available upon request. Evelyn June Carter." She attached the PDF to an email and sent it to her Bible study group, her church's community coordinator, and 3 of the friends who had messaged her privately. She didn't CC Michael. A few hours later, she received replies, short notes of support, confusion, or quiet apology. Some didn't reply at all. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Carl Benson. Saw the post. Don't engage online. It'll escalate the wrong way. Keep everything in writing. Quiet strength is your weapon here." She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. By mid-afternoon, Sandra called. "The trust documents are officially filed. We have confirmation from the clerk's office. Everything is now under your sole control and out of reach from Michael, permanently." "Good," Evelyn said. "Thank you." "No sign of him today?" "Not a peep." Sandra hesitated. "He'll find another angle, they always do." "I'm counting on it," Evelyn said. That evening, Evelyn sat on her small front porch, a ball of thick green yarn in her lap and the beginnings of a scarf unraveling across her knuckles. The porch swing creaked with each gentle shift of her weight. The sun was low and warm across her shoulders, and the sound of sprinklers hissed from a nearby lawn. She could still feel the bruising weight of Michael's words online, but it didn't sink in the way he'd hoped. She knew what was real. She had the paperwork, the filings, the investigation. And beneath that, a truth even harder to shake. She no longer owed him silence. The scarf grew inch by inch under her needles, a quiet rebellion stitched in moss green. She could hear a few neighbors chatting across the street. Someone was grilling. The world hadn't stopped for her war. It never did. Her phone buzzed once more. "Unknown number. Tell me how much you want. We can make this go away. No police, no lawyers." She stared at the message, then blocked the number. The call from Carl came just after breakfast. "It's done," he said. "The joint account's frozen. Michael won't be able to move another cent until the fraud investigation's closed. We're running a trace on the withdrawals now." Evelyn didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped slightly. A pressure she hadn't realized she'd been holding in her chest finally started to release. She logged into her online banking. For a moment, the screen flickered as it loaded. Then there it was, the familiar account view she used to check every Friday like clockwork. And this time, her name was there. Her name, not buried in secondary access, not hidden behind shared permissions. Primary account holder, Evelyn June Carter. The balance reflected deposits she hadn't seen in months, amounts that had disappeared into Michael's orbit without explanation. Now they sat quietly in her account, waiting. She leaned back in her chair. The quiet in the condo felt different, not hollow, just still. She didn't hesitate. She pulled out the folder from Sandra's office, flipped to the trust setup instructions, and followed them step by step. A few clicks later, the majority of the funds were transferred into a protected retirement trust, one that Michael couldn't touch, even with a crowbar and a lawyer. When she was done, she printed the confirmation slip and slid it into a new folder marked SECURED. She sat with it in her lap for a long time, a slow breath in, a slower one out. From the front window, she could see sunlight flickering between the trees lining her quiet Denver street. It was nearly noon. The air had that golden, late summer look to it, like the world was easing into its last stretch of warmth before surrendering to fall. Evelyn grabbed her walking cane and her cardigan. City Park wasn't far, and today she didn't want to sit still. The park was alive with motion. Joggers traced the edges of the pond, and children squealed near the playground while their parents hovered with coffee cups and sunscreen. Evelyn followed the paved path around the water, past benches and weeping willows, letting the rhythm of her cane on concrete set her pace. She was halfway through the loop when she stopped to rest beneath a tree. That's when she heard it. Raised voices, sharp, hushed, too familiar. Across the parking lot, standing near a dented black sedan, were Michael and Dana. Dana's arms were folded across her chest, her chin jutting forward. "You said she wouldn't fight back," she snapped. "You promised this would be clean. You promised." Michael muttered something Evelyn couldn't hear. Dana leaned in closer, her voice even lower now. "You don't get to burn down our future because you underestimated your mother." Then she turned and walked off toward the sidewalk, keys clenched tight in her fist. Michael stayed by the car, his shoulders slumped, hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. Evelyn didn't move. She just watched. She had nothing left to say to either of them. Not now, not here. Later that evening, back at her condo, she pulled off her shoes, poured a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table, her legs aching but her mind oddly clear. The phone rang. Sandra. "I just wanted to check in," her attorney said. "You've been through a lot this week." "I know," Evelyn said, "but it's getting quieter." Sandra's voice softened. "That's what peace feels like, Evelyn. Don't let the quiet scare you." They chatted a moment longer, brief but real. Then Evelyn hung up, tucked the folder of trust documents into her filing cabinet, and turned off the kitchen light. It arrived on a Thursday morning, tucked in with the usual mail. Credit card offers, a local grocery flyer, a window cleaning coupon she'd never use. But the thick, cream-colored envelope stood out immediately. The Denver County seal, embossed in gold in the top left corner, confirmed what Evelyn already suspected. It was real now. She brought the envelope into the kitchen and laid it on the table next to her cooling cup of coffee. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she sat for a few moments, letting the weight of the moment settle around her like dust. There was no longer any room for denial, no way to pretend this was just a family disagreement that might resolve itself over dinner. When she finally slid her letter opener beneath the flap and unfolded the pages inside, the legal language didn't rattle her. It was clean, professional, direct. "You are hereby summoned to appear to provide testimony in case number 45,738, the state of Colorado versus Michael Carter." Her name, her real name, printed firmly as witness for the prosecution. She placed the letter down, carefully smoothed the corners, and reached for her reading glasses. A deep breath came, not sharp or panicked, but slow and steady. It wasn't fear that clung to her skin. It was readiness. The kind of readiness that came after a long, bruising silence. The phone started ringing within the hour. Michael's name lit up the screen again and again, first in bold, then in missed call notifications, then as voicemails she refused to play. She watched the screen glow and dim, until eventually the silence returned. By mid-afternoon, he'd called 8 times. She deleted every message without listening to a single one. That evening, just before sundown, she spotted Dana's SUV idling slowly in front of the house. The headlights weren't on. The engine was barely audible. But Evelyn saw the outline of Dana's face through the driver's window, turned slightly in her direction. There was no knock at the door, no confrontation, just a long, tense look from across the yard. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then the car moved on, tires whispering against the curb as it disappeared around the corner. Evelyn didn't bother pulling back the curtain. She simply turned off the porch light and locked the door for the night. Later, in the dim quiet of her bedroom, she reached into the nightstand drawer and retrieved the journal she'd been writing in every evening since the case began. The leather cover was warm from her hand. She opened to a blank page and began writing slowly, letting her thoughts pour out in full sentences instead of fragments. "I didn't think I'd ever find myself in a courtroom at this age. Not like this, not against my own son. But I can't ignore what he did, and I won't protect him from the consequences he chose for himself. Carl says I'll be questioned directly. Sandra says just answer the questions truthfully and nothing more. They both say I'm ready. I want to believe them. The pen glided steadily across the page, her hand no longer trembling the way it had weeks ago when all of this started. Her handwriting, once so hesitant, had returned to something close to its old rhythm. When she finished the entry, she rested the pen gently in the binding and closed the journal with care. It no longer felt like a tool for venting. It had become a record, her version of the truth, untouched by filters, spin, or anyone else's version of events. The next few days passed in a kind of surreal calm. She kept to her routine: coffee at sunrise, a walk through City Park with her cane, reading on the porch when the weather allowed. But underneath that calm, she felt something building. A quiet, unrelenting resolve that tethered her to every decision she'd made. She heard nothing from Michael. No more calls, no emails, not even another Facebook post. But the absence of noise didn't fool her. It wasn't surrender. It was strategy. She knew him well enough to know that silence was simply another form of control. Then, on Monday morning, she heard the knock. Not the doorbell. Not the usual flutter of mail through the slot. A knock. 3 deliberate, measured raps on wood. She opened the door to find a courier in a navy jacket, holding a padded envelope and a clipboard. "Delivery for Evelyn Carter," he said. She signed automatically and accepted the package. No return address. Back inside, she set the envelope on the table and opened it with the same blade she had used for the subpoena. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a printed transcript, anonymous tip, submitted via online portal. R.E. Michael Carter. Not just his mother's money, 2 other names, 2 other accounts. Same method. Look deeper. Evelyn read it twice, then again. Her breath slowed. The case wasn't just about her anymore. The courthouse smelled like cold marble and copier toner. It was a familiar scent somehow, like libraries and waiting rooms, but today it made Evelyn's stomach churn. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. The ceilings weren't cathedral high like the ones in movies, and the wood paneling on the walls looked as though it hadn't been sanded in decades. Still, the formality of the space pressed against her shoulders as she stepped through the double doors. Sandra met her just inside, dressed in slate gray, calm as ever. She offered a warm, steadying look, then reached out to gently adjust the collar of Evelyn's blouse. "You don't have to be perfect," she said quietly. "Just honest." Carl was already seated in the gallery, not in uniform but in a dark blazer that looked recently pressed. When he saw Evelyn walk in, he gave her the smallest of nods, an anchor in a room built to tilt you off balance. They were seated for over an hour as the judge went through preliminary motions, timelines, procedural language. Evelyn tried to focus, but her eyes drifted. The back of Michael's head was just ahead and to the left. His hair was trimmed neatly, like always. His suit, dark navy. He didn't turn once, not even when her name was called. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter," the clerk announced. "Please approach the stand." Her cane echoed a little as she made her way to the witness box. The courtroom was silent except for her measured steps. She didn't rush. She didn't wobble. She stood tall as the bailiff asked her to raise her right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?" "I do," Evelyn said. Once seated, she folded her hands in her lap, waiting. The prosecutor stepped forward and introduced himself with practiced ease. No drama, just clarity. "Mrs. Carter, can you tell us about the pension account in question?" Her voice was soft at first, but sure. "Yes, I opened that account in 2018. It was under my name only. The pension office deposited into it each month, and I used it for my living expenses." "And when did you realize something had changed?" Evelyn inhaled through her nose, steadying herself. "This past spring. I received a bank statement showing that my son, Michael Carter, was now the primary account holder. My name was no longer listed." Michael shifted slightly in his seat, his jaw moving like he was grinding down a molar. Still, he didn't look at her. "And did you give your son permission to remove your name from that account?" "No," she said. I did not. What did you do after discovering the change? I gathered documentation, including my original pension forms and bank statements. Then I contacted the Denver Police Financial Crimes Division. Officer Carl Benson was assigned to my case. Carl's nod in the gallery was almost imperceptible, but Evelyn saw it. It was enough. The prosecutor approached the evidence table and held up the document Carl's team had prepared, the one with the side-by-side signatures. Can you identify these? Evelyn leaned forward slightly. Yes, the one on the left is my original signature. The one on the right is not mine. Are you absolutely certain? I am. And yet the fraudulent signature appears on the updated bank authorization form submitted by your son, correct? Yes, she said, the word landing like a gavel in her throat. Silence followed. The prosecutor stepped away. The defense declined to cross-examine. When the judge dismissed her from the stand, Evelyn stepped down slowly. She didn't look at Michael as she passed him. She didn't need to. She could feel the tension in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched together in his lap. Dana sat behind him, stiff and colorless, her eyes fixed on the floor as if she could disappear into the linoleum if she just stared hard enough. She hadn't looked Evelyn's way once. Back at the defense table, Michael turned his head slightly, just enough to glance in Evelyn's direction. But by then, she was already walking away. She sat beside Sandra, who reached over and gently squeezed her hand under the table. "You did exactly what you needed to do," her attorney whispered. Evelyn nodded, but said nothing. The moment was too full. The courthouse hallway was quieter than Evelyn expected when she returned 2 days later, not solemn, not tense, just muted, as if the walls themselves were waiting for resolution. She sat in a small conference room with Sandra, the morning sun slicing through narrow windows and painting long lines across the file-strewn table. A fresh stack of paperwork sat between them. At the top, the official freeze order from the court, an elegant stamp in blue ink sealing the decision Evelyn had fought so hard to reach. "He can't access anything," Sandra said, sliding the document toward her. "Not the old accounts, not the credit line, and not the residual deposits from your pension or the estate. It's all blocked. Pending the outcome of the case, of course, but the order is clear." Evelyn reached for her glasses and read every line, slowly, deliberately. She didn't skim anymore. She had learned what could be buried in fine print. When she reached the end, she didn't smile, but her spine straightened. "I want to finish the trust transfer today." Sandra was already nodding. "We can wire everything through the firm's fiduciary unit. No loopholes, no access outside your name, not even by accident." They worked in quiet focus for the next 45 minutes. Evelyn read and initialed every page, cross-checking account numbers, beneficiary designations, and contact protocols for emergency access. The documents bore her signature in 3 places, each one slow and certain. As Sandra notarized the last form, Evelyn's phone began to buzz in her bag. She knew before she pulled it out who it would be. Dana. The screen pulsed with the incoming call. She stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Evelyn," Dana began, her voice already a thread thinner than usual. "Please, can we just talk for a minute?" Evelyn kept her tone even. "We're talking." There was a pause on the other end. Then, the floodgate. "I know you're angry, but this is all falling apart. Michael's hearing next week? They're talking about restitution, and legal fees, and possible probation." She cut herself off, then shifted tactics. "He made mistakes. I know that. But if you keep pressing like this, there's no way to recover. What are you trying to prove?" Evelyn looked across the table at Sandra, who quietly stood and stepped outside, closing the conference room door behind her. "I'm not trying to prove anything," Evelyn said, her voice low, steady. "I'm trying to protect what I built, what I earned, what your husband decided he could take because he thought I was too tired or too trusting to stop him." Dana's breath faltered. "We're family, Evelyn. Families don't do this in court." "No," Evelyn said calmly. "Families don't forge signatures, or reroute accounts behind someone's back, or gaslight them until they question their own memory." Dana was silent. "I'll let the lawyers speak from now on." Evelyn finished. Goodbye. She ended the call, set the phone face down on the table, and let out a breath that felt like it had been held for a year. Moments later, Sandra returned. Everything's processed. You're fully secured. No one touches your money without a court order and a signed request in your hand. Evelyn nodded slowly. Thank you. You did more than most people ever do, Sandra said. Most just let it happen and spend the rest of their lives trying to explain why. Outside, the city pulsed in late morning light, cars weaving past the courthouse steps, pigeons fluttering near a bench, a pair of women in suits laughing over something on a tablet. Evelyn watched it all from the glass windows in the lobby as she stepped out with her cane, the documents in her bag tucked tightly under one arm. She didn't feel victorious. She felt clean, like something old had been scrubbed away. Later that evening, Carl called from his office. Just wanted to say you did good, he said. I see a lot of these cases. They rarely go this far, and they almost never go this well. Feels strange, Evelyn admitted, but I'm not afraid of the quiet anymore. Carl paused. That's the best kind of win. The courtroom didn't cheer. It didn't gasp. It simply breathed, a collective exhale when the judge issued the final ruling. In light of the evidence presented, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Evelyn June Carter. Restitution in the amount of $72,400 is awarded. Michael Carter is hereby placed on supervised probation for a period of 18 months. Further financial monitoring and restricted access to fiduciary privileges are to be enforced for the duration of the term. Michael sat perfectly still, as if he thought that staying motionless might keep the world from noticing what had just happened. His lawyer offered a soft pat to his shoulder, but Michael didn't react. His gaze remained fixed on the floor in front of him, an island of courtroom tile he couldn't escape. Dana was nowhere in sight. Evelyn didn't look in his direction as she stood. She had already spent enough energy trying to get him to meet her eyes. Now she didn't need him to. The truth had done the talking. Sandra gathered the paperwork in swift, neat motions. Her pen moved fluidly over final notations. It's over, she whispered, more softly than celebratory. No, Evelyn said, fastening the button on her coat. It's done. It's not over. They left through the side exit, the Colorado wind sweeping through the parking lot as they stepped outside. The sun had dipped just enough to cast long shadows behind them, but Evelyn didn't move like someone hiding from shade. Her walk was slow but deliberate, her cane ticking against the sidewalk with the rhythm of earned ground. Later that week, the news filtered in from a neighbor who worked across town. Dana had moved out. No dramatic exit, no suitcases hurled onto the lawn, just a quiet U-Haul early on a Sunday morning. One trip, no return. Michael was left alone in that modern duplex he'd once bragged about over Easter dinner, the one Evelyn had never quite felt welcome in. Now it was his to sit in, to explain, to reckon with. Evelyn didn't waste a breath on wondering how he felt. She had her own paperwork to file. 2 days after the ruling, Sandra met her at the office with a fresh estate packet. The envelope was thick and clean, no creases, no corners bent by hesitation. It felt good in Evelyn's hands, decisive. This is the new will, Sandra explained. The amendment revokes any previous beneficiary designations involving Michael. The language is airtight. He's legally excluded, permanently. And the trust redirection? Sandra smiled, tapping the final page. Your entire legacy goes to the Denver Education Foundation. We've already set up a named scholarship fund in Harold's memory. It'll support aspiring public school secretaries and administrative assistants, exactly the way you wanted. Evelyn's eyes lingered on the line that named the fund, the Harold and Evelyn Carter Honor Scholarship. She signed with a pen that didn't pause, didn't falter. Her hand moved with the kind of steadiness only truth could grant. Sandra watched her with something that looked like quiet pride. You know, she said as she notarized the final page, this isn't just legal closure. It's personal redemption. You rewrote your ending. Evelyn closed the folder and folded her hands atop it. No, she said, her voice soft but sharp. I just started telling it myself. They shared a brief smile. Then Sandra slid the completed file into her briefcase and stood. By the way, she added casually, Carl called. He asked if I'd pass along a message. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. He's organizing a senior fraud prevention seminar next month. Downtown. City-backed. He wants you to be the keynote speaker. The suggestion landed like a stone dropped into calm water. Unexpected, jarring, but somehow right. Evelyn blinked, caught off guard by the image. Herself at a podium, speaking into a microphone, a room full of strangers listening not out of sympathy, but respect. "I'm not a public speaker," she said. Sandra tilted her head. "You weren't a litigant either, until you were." That night, Evelyn sat on her porch again, a fresh skein of yarn in her lap, the green scarf nearly finished. She hadn't decided if she would accept Carl's invitation, but the idea didn't scare her. Not anymore. The wind moved softly through the trees, rustling leaves that had just begun their autumn shift. The air smelled like dry grass and turning pages. She watched the evening come alive in quiet tones. The folding chairs creaked as the audience settled into the multi-purpose room of the East Denver Community Center. Pale yellow walls, low ceilings, and the faint scent of floor wax. Nothing glamorous, but something warm pulsed beneath the fluorescent lights. Something real. Evelyn stood just behind the podium, her speech folded neatly in her hands. She wore a muted teal cardigan and her best slacks, the same ones she used to wear on parent-teacher conference nights when she worked at the elementary school. She hadn't been this publicly visible in years. Carl adjusted the mic for her, then leaned in and whispered, "All yours, when you're ready." She nodded once. Her hands didn't tremble. The audience before her was mostly gray-haired. Couples, singles, quiet clusters of friends who had arrived early to get a good seat. Some sat with notebooks, others with thermoses. All of them wore expressions Evelyn had come to recognize, a mix of guarded curiosity and quiet exhaustion. These weren't just attendees, they were veterans of worry, of disappointment, of children who had once meant the world and now barely made contact. She unfolded her notes but didn't look at them. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she began, her voice clear. "And not too long ago, I found out my name had been removed from my own bank account." The room shifted. A few heads tilted. The air thinned slightly, the way it does when someone says something unvarnished and true. "I thought it was a mistake at first," she continued. "A glitch, maybe a typo. But I kept reading. I kept looking. And what I found was that my son, Michael, had forged my signature. He'd rerouted my pension, changed access settings, and hidden the truth beneath the idea of helping." She didn't pause for effect, but the silence after her words did it for her. She looked out over the crowd. Many were nodding. One woman near the aisle clutched a tissue she hadn't meant to need. "I share this not to shame him. That part's already happened. I share it because someone else in this room has already seen the warning signs. Maybe your adult child suddenly started checking your mail. Maybe a niece or nephew suggested you just sign this one form so they can help you with taxes. Maybe you've felt that flicker of confusion when a bill looks different, or your balance doesn't look quite right." She inhaled slowly, steady. "Trust is beautiful. Until it's weaponized." The words hung heavy. "But I'm not here today as a victim. I'm here as someone who learned how to take her name back. With the help of good people and the law, I froze the accounts, filed the evidence, and revoked his access. I stood in court and told the truth. And when the ruling came down, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. I had gotten back to the person I was before silence and fear made a home in my house." She glanced down, then folded the speech back into thirds. Her eyes swept the room once more. "If it happened to you, or someone you love, don't wait for someone else to fix it. You are not too old, you are not confused, and you do not owe anyone the right to erase you." The room held its breath for a beat, and then the applause came, not loud or theatrical, but warm and persistent, rising like dawn breaking slowly over the room. Carl stepped forward, his voice steady over the microphone. "That, folks, is what courage looks like. Evelyn, on behalf of the Denver Senior Protection Task Force, thank you. Not just for surviving this, but for showing the rest of us how to fight." The applause rose again, and this time Evelyn let herself smile. From the front row, Sandra clapped slowly, her expression filled with quiet satisfaction, the kind of pride that doesn't need words. After the event, a few attendees lined up to shake Evelyn's hand or share brief stories of their own. One man pressed a folded paper into her palm, an old bank statement, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me the push." She simply nodded. No fanfare, no preaching, just presence. An hour later, Evelyn stood outside the center beneath the soft gray light of approaching dusk. Her scarf was wrapped neatly around her neck. Carl lingered beside her on the sidewalk, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup. "You ever think you'd be doing public service again?" he asked. "I thought I was done giving speeches," she said. "Guess not." "You're good at it," he said. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out across the parking lot. Families arriving for the evening youth classes, a teenager on a skateboard drifting by, someone laughing on a phone nearby. Life went on. But this time she wasn't just surviving it, she was part of it again. Finally, she said, "I'm not done. Not yet." And she meant it. The envelope came in late morning, slipped through the mail slot with a faint rustle and a metallic click. Evelyn heard it land as she stood in her kitchen, hands wrapped around a warm mug, the smell of cinnamon coffee curling into the air like memory. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she turned off the stove burner and walked to the front door, bending slowly to retrieve the envelope from the floor. It was a monthly pension statement. She knew the texture before she saw the label, that slightly waxy paper with a folded crease you couldn't smooth out no matter how hard you tried. She carried it to the dining table and sat in her usual chair, the one with a cushion she'd sewn herself 2 winters ago. The sun was spilling through the lace curtain, throwing soft rectangles of light across the wood. She took her time, peeling open the flap, as if the act of reading it might change what it said. But when she unfolded the paper and saw her name, and only her name, printed clearly at the top, she let out a breath that didn't shake on the way out. Evelyn June Carter, primary beneficiary/pension account holder. The weight of it wasn't just in the paper, it was in the certainty, in the absence of shadows, in knowing she had reclaimed something that had once been quietly stolen from her and made to look like love. Her fingers traced the ink lightly, not in disbelief, but in quiet gratitude. Not triumph, not vengeance, just peace. She placed the statement in a folder labeled Keep, then made herself another cup of coffee. No rush, no need to count spoons or double-check bills. The pot gurgled contentedly behind her as she leaned against the counter and watched the steam rise in gentle curls. Outside, the day was soft and cloudless, the kind of early fall day that still felt like summer if you walked slowly enough. She grabbed her cardigan, her cane, and her shoulder bag, and locked the front door behind her with 2 easy clicks. She didn't need a destination, but her feet led her to City Park. It wasn't crowded, just the right amount of movement. A group of teenagers tossed a frisbee back and forth near the lake. 2 women with strollers paused on the path to admire the ducks. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing a harmonica, clumsy and earnest, the notes floating in and out of tune with the breeze. Evelyn found a bench under the wide stretch of a maple tree, its leaves halfway between green and rust. She sat slowly, setting her cane beside her, letting her body relax into the old wooden slats. Across the field, a child in a red jacket chased bubbles. His laughter reached her like a skipped stone across water, light, imperfect, whole. His father followed at a distance, arms crossed but smiling. Evelyn tilted her face toward the sky, not all the way, just enough to feel the sun against her eyelids. The betrayal hadn't disappeared. It wasn't a thing that could be erased, only named, faced, moved through. But the heaviness had shifted. It no longer lived in her chest, waiting to curl into her sleep. It no longer whispered through the hallways of her condo, or tightened her grip every time the phone rang. It was behind her now, part of the landscape but not the view. She reached into her bag and pulled out the pension statement one more time, smoothed the corners, read her name again. Harold would have been proud, she thought. Not because she'd won, but because she hadn't let herself vanish. Not quietly, not politely, not this time. She folded the paper neatly and returned it to her bag. then sat back and watched the world move, slow, ordinary, alive. The boy in red had fallen in the grass and now sat giggling at his shoelaces. A breeze stirred the maple's branches. Somewhere behind her, someone was calling out a lunch order from a food cart, and Evelyn, with her hand resting lightly on her cane, closed her eyes for just a moment, long enough to let the stillness settle, because for the first time in a long, long while, she knew exactly who she was, and she'd signed her name to it. Some signatures last longer than blood.